Welcome, class. I'm Dr. Kem. Today, we're going on the absolute ultimate micro to macro journey. In this explainer, we're going to decode the very fingerprints of the universe using one of the most powerful tools in all of modern analytical chemistry. I'm talking about atomic emission spectroscopy. Seriously, whether we're analyzing the purity of the water you drink, checking the strength of a steel alloy, or literally figuring out what a rock on another planet is made of, this is the technique that makes it all possible.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today's explainer. We're going to hit the fundamentals of AES, check out the instrumentation and types, walk through the actual analytical procedure, navigate the inevitable interferences and limitations, look at some awesome real-world applications, and finally, compare it to other spectroscopic methods. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Fundamentals of AES. Decoding the Elemental Fingerprint. Let's set the stage by looking back at the brilliant minds who actually built this field. You know, the history of atomic emission spectroscopy is basically this epic 400-year scientific detective story. It kicks off way back in 1666 when Sir Isaac Newton used a simple glass prism to disperse sunlight. But the real game changer, that happened around 1859. That's when Kirchhoff and Bunsen realized that elements burning in a flame produce these unique, characteristic spectral lines. Fast forward to 1913, Niels Bohr gives us the quantum mechanical explanation for why that happens. And then, by 1964, Fassel and Greenfield developed the ultra-hot, inductively coupled plasma, which pretty much revolutionized trace analysis as we know it today. So what exactly is AES? Simply put, it's an analytical technique where we completely vaporize samples and basically force them to emit photons. By measuring the specific wavelength and the intensity of that emitted light, we can create a unique spectral barcode for virtually every single metal and nonmetal on the periodic table. The wavelength tells us exactly what element is in the sample, and the intensity, well, that tells us how much of it is actually in there. And here's the core theory of how that works. You have your atoms in their lowest energy, most stable configuration, right? The ground state. We come in and blast them with intense thermal energy, which promotes their electrons to a higher, highly unstable, excited state. But because nature absolutely loves stability, those electrons don't stay there. They spontaneously fall back down to the ground state. And as they drop, they emit a photon, whose energy exactly matches the difference between those two states. That specific energy dictates the precise wavelength of the light. Boom, you've got your elemental fingerprint. Section 2. Instrumentation and AES types. The gauntlet of the sample. Let's step into the lab and see the actual hardware our sample has to survive. Okay, follow the path of our sample here. It usually starts as a liquid, getting drawn into a nebulizer where a high-velocity gas just completely shatters it into a fine aerosol. Then it moves through a spray chamber. That chamber discards the larger droplets and sends only the absolute finest mist straight into our excitation source, like a flame or a plasma. There, the sample gets atomized and excited. The light it emits is funneled into a monochromometer, which basically acts like a highly advanced prism to separate the complex light into individual wavelengths. Finally, a detector, like a photomultiplier tube, counts those photons and sends the data right over to our readout processor. Now, we've got a few different tools in our analytical arsenal, but they all rely on different heat sources to do the heavy lifting of exciting those atoms. You've got flame emission spectroscopy running at around 1700 to 3000 Kelvin, which is perfect for easily excited elements like sodium. But for the really tough stuff, we use high-energy sources like an AC spark. That thing creates transient temperatures up to a massive 40,000 Kelvin. It is absolutely perfect for fast metallurgical analysis. But what's really fascinating is the sheer sustained power of the inductively coupled plasma, or the ICP. By using a radio frequency field to heat argon gas, we create a self-sustaining plasma that just sits there at a blistering 6,000 to 8,000 Kelvin. Because it's so incredibly hot, it guarantees virtually complete atomization of any compound you throw into it. Plus, the inert argon environment stops unwanted chemical reactions, giving us beautifully clean, highly precise emission spectra. Section 3. The analytical procedure, from prep to data. So how do we actually pull off this chemical magic in a day-to-day lab routine? Well, it all starts with sample prep, which is absolutely critical. We can't just toss a rock or a piece of food directly into the nebulizer, right? We generally start by dissolving solid samples in really strong acids, usually under high heat and pressure in a microwave digester. Once we've got a perfectly clear aqueous solution, we feed it into the instrument. That generates the aerosol, atomizes it in the plasma to trigger those electronic transitions, and finally separates and detects those emitted wavelengths. And I want to highlight a really crucial number for you here.
5 to 6. Modern ICP AES instruments have a linear dynamic range covering 5 to 6 orders of magnitude. Why is that such a big deal? Because it means you can measure tiny trace elements at parts per billion levels and major matrix elements sitting at massive percentage levels, all simultaneously in the exact same run. You don't have to stop everything, dilute your sample, and run it all over again. It is a massive game changer for lab efficiency.
Now, the machine itself only spits out light intensities. To turn those flashes of light into actual chemical concentrations, we use some pretty clever calibration strategies. We run known external standards to build a calibration curve, but we also heavily rely on the internal standard method. We add a constant amount of an element, like yttrium, to every single sample. Because we already know exactly how much yttrium is supposed to be in there, if its signal suddenly drops, we know instantly that the plasma fluctuated or the nebulizer clogged. And the best part? The software just mathematically compensates for it automatically.
Section 4. Navigating interferences and limitations. Fighting the villains. Let's talk about the tricky part of analytical chemistry, the stuff that tries to mess up our data. Because, look, no technique is perfect. Imagine you're in the lab testing drinking water, and your readout suddenly shows a massive, terrifying spike in highly toxic lead. Panic sets in, right? But is it really lead? Or is an interfering element tricking your detector into seeing lead at that exact same wavelength? This brings us to our common interferences. The absolute most notorious ones are spectral overlaps. See, a high-temperature plasma excites everything, so a complex sample might spit out 10,000 different emission lines at once. If a really strong iron line happens to overlap perfectly with an arsenic line, your instrument might yell, "arsenic," when there isn't any. We fight this by telling the software to look at alternative wavelengths or by mathematically subtracting the known background. We also have to deal with physical matrix effects, like when thick, viscous samples just don't nebulize as well as our watery standards. We also have to be real about the practical limitations of AES. First off, the financial barrier is steep. A high-end ICP AES can easily run you up to $150,000. Second, that plasma is incredibly thirsty. It eats through about 15 liters of ultra-pure argon gas every single minute. That can cost a lab up to $15,000 a year just in gas. And finally, standard argon ICPs really struggle to detect certain nonmetals, like halogens, just because their excitation energies are way too high.
Section 5, Real-World AES Applications. Solving global problems. Because honestly, those lab costs and complexities are totally worth it when you look at the massive real-world impact this technology has.
Just looking across different industries, you can really see the incredible versatility of ASS. Environmental labs use it constantly to monitor our drinking water for toxic lead and arsenic. In pharmaceuticals, they use it to strictly enforce regulations, making absolutely sure life-saving drugs are free of heavy metal impurities. Food safety labs use it to screen our crops and seafood for mercury. And over in metallurgy, Spark ASS is literally used right on the factory floor to verify that an aircraft-grade aluminum alloy has the perfect chemical composition, all in under 60 seconds.
And get this technology has literally left the planet. Laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, or LIBS, which is a specialized form of AES, is sitting right now on the mast of NASA's Curiosity and Perseverance rovers. We are literally shooting high-energy pulsed lasers at rocks on Mars, creating tiny microplasmas, and reading their elemental emission spectra from up to 7 meters away. We are analyzing Mars rocks without ever bringing them back to Earth. How cool is that?
Section 6, Comparing Spectroscopic Methods, and our final summary. Let's wrap up this explainer by taking a step back and seeing how our mighty AES stacks up against its peers. When you compare it to an older technique, like flame atomic absorption spectroscopy, or FAAS, the modern ICP AES just completely dominates. Where FAAS uses a relatively cool flame to measure just one single element at a time, the ICP uses what is essentially a localized sun to measure over 70 elements simultaneously. And while FAAS maxes out at a dynamic range of maybe 2 to 3 orders of magnitude, the ICP AES gives us that beautiful 5 to 6 orders, making it exponentially faster and way more capable for complex samples. So to quickly recap our journey today, atomic emission spectroscopy offers us truly unprecedented speed, sensitivity, and flexibility. The ability to run 70 elements in a single 1 to 3 minute measurement, hitting parts per billion detection limits, all while suffering from minimal chemical interferences, that cements it as the absolute gold standard in modern analytical chemistry. I want to leave you with this final thought to really spark your curiosity. From Newton's simple glass prism all the way to shooting lasers at the surface of Mars, Our ability to read these microscopic elemental fingerprints has entirely changed how we view the physical world. As our detectors get even more sensitive and our software gets smarter and smarter, what are we going to discover next? Because the universe is constantly speaking to us in light, we just have to make sure we're listening. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Kem, on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep exploring.